Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. I appreciate you being with me so very, very much. Hope you're having a fantastic week. My week so far has gone just wonderfully well. And matter of fact, I'm just having a lot of fun. Okay, we've been looking at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 35, where Jesus said, "Heaven and earth shall pass, but my words shall never pass away." Now, obviously, there's an awful lot that we could go into on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break from the exegetical aspect of it to share with you just a little bit of the ancient testimony involving the idea of the temple being heaven and earth, that Israel's world, covenant world, was considered heaven and earth. Now, I'm going to come back, okay, I'll come back to our discussion of the passing of heaven and earth insofar as it relates to the covenant world, the temple, and what it represented, etc. Because I want to look at Hebrews chapter 12, and I want to look at, we'll give a pass on 2 Peter chapter 3, short time, and then we'll look at the book of Revelation. Not going to spend, a year looking at those three passages. But I think you would find it interesting. I certainly have down through the years. And look, let me remind you that I was one of those that in my younger days, I believed that in Matthew 24:35, Jesus was just unequivocally, unambiguously predicting the destruction of literal physical heaven and earth. When I really began to dig into the Hebraic usage of the terminology and the language, even the idioms, and the history and the culture of the ancient Hebrews, I was astounded, first of all, at my own ignorance. And I'm still sometimes astounded at my own ignorance as I read and as I study, and I just see so much that I did not know. I had a friend ask me some years ago, we were discussing a lot of the history, the culture of the ancient Hebrews, and I was just sharing some things, and he goes, where'd you come up with this stuff? Where did you find this stuff? Now, he was of the same fellowship that I was raised in. And let me say this. In that fellowship, you are not really encouraged to pursue scholarship. And that's a blunt statement, but that's just all there is to it. And I just told him, I said, well, listen, in our fellowship, we have never encouraged the pursuit of scholarship. Kind of scorned it because of the higher critical, liberalistic, He said, well, that's true. I said, well, I discovered years ago that I was completely, totally ignorant when it came to understanding the ancient Hebrew culture, even their language, understanding truly context. And I said, I set out to correct that. And I said, I'm still working on it very, very diligently. And he said, well, it just reminds me of how badly we have failed in our study of the Bible. But all of that aside, part of what I discovered years ago was that there was an understanding in the first century, and prior to that, by the way, that the temple was known as heaven and earth. I want to read to you, and I'm not going to read. I have 2 pages of quotation from Josephus, all right? These citations are taken from Josephus, the Antiquities, Book 3, 6 and 4, and Book 3, 7 and 7. And again, I'm only going to read part of it for time consideration, but Moses, in describing the tabernacle, and of course the temple built on that pattern, as for the inside, Moses parted its length into 3 partitions. At the distance of 10 cubits from the most secret end, Moses placed 4 pillars, the workmanship of which was the very same with that of the rest, and they stood upon the like bases with them, each a small matter distant from his fellow. Now the room within those pillars was the most holy place, but the rest of the room was the tabernacle, which was open to the priest. However, this proportion of the measures of the tabernacle proved to be an imitation of the systems of the world. For that third part thereof, which was within the four pillars, to which the priests were not admitted, is as it were a heaven peculiar to God. But the space of the 20 cubits is, as it were, sea and land, on which men live, and so this part is peculiar to the priest only. And then I want to skip down. And then I want to read down. Now the whole temple was called the holy place, but that part which was within the four pillars and to which none were admitted was called the Holy of Holies. What did he call the Holy of Holies? Heaven. Now, in book 3, chapter 7, here one may wonder at the ill will with which men bear us, and which they profess to bear on account of our despising that deity which they pretend to honor. For if anyone does but consider the fabric of the tabernacle, and take a view of the garments of the high priest, and of those vessels which we make use of in our sacred ministration, he will find that our legislator was a divine man, and that we are unjustly reproached by others. For if anyone do, without prejudice and with judgment, look upon these things, he will find that they are every one made in a way of imitation and representation of the universe. When Moses distinguished the tabernacle into 3 parts and allowed 2 of them to the priest as a place accessible and common, he denoted the land and sea, these being of general access to all, but he set apart the 3rd division for God because heaven is inaccessible to man. And he continues. So here we have Josephus, who was a priest in the temple in the 1st century. And he calls the temple heaven and earth. Now, skipping forward a good bit of time to an early church writer, and here considering the question of the passing of heaven and earth. I'm reading from Origen, who was a very, very influential church writer. He said in his book, Contra Celsum, book 4, this is found in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, volume 4, page 505 and 506. He says, quote, "We do not deny then that the purificatory fire and the destruction of the world took place in order that evil might be swept away and all things be renewed. For we assert that we have learned these things from the sacred books of the prophets, and anyone who likes may convict this statement of falsehood if it be not the case, watch, if it be not the case that the whole Jewish nation was overthrown within one single generation after Jesus had undergone these sufferings at their hands. For 42 years, I think, after the date of the crucifixion of Jesus, did the destruction of Jerusalem take place." What was Origen saying? He said the world was destroyed in AD 70. He said evil was destroyed in AD 70. I don't know how language could get any clearer. Now somebody jumps up and says, well, yeah, but, Origen was a futurist. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean he didn't say what he said there. And all that means is Origen, just like so many of the early church writers, Origen was inconsistent. So I thought I'd share these interesting and significant quotes. And by the way, you can go back in history, you can go back to scholarship, and you can find many, many noted scholars who admitted that Matthew chapter 24:35 and thus 2 Peter chapter 3 was fulfilled in AD 70. Okay? Well, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. A little bit of a break from our exegetical work, but interesting and significant. Don't forget to join me tomorrow as we continue our refutation of Lance Conley's book, Hope Resurrected, as we continue our examination of Romans 11, 26 and 27, as it was to be the fulfillment of Isaiah 27. Now, I've already shown you enough to refute Lance Conley's book, but you don't want to miss what we've got in store. So I'll see you there.